Let's talk about more crypto news, and specifically the New York's mining ban, the moratorium for 2 years, where they're banning essentially new miners to utilize non-renewable energy, right? Objectors to New York's mining ban says governments can't dictate valid use of energy. Vitalik Buterin and Nick Carter offered opposing opinions to New York's mining ban, saying it's unjustifiable for governments to decide on acceptable uses of electricity. Ethereum's co-founder Vitalik Buterin and Coinmetrics co-founder Nick Carter recently opposed the recent mining ban decision of New York, saying that it's not okay for governments to decide on what appropriate usage of electricity is. Carter tweeted that New York's ban on crypto mining directly controls what constitutes proper use of power. He implied that this is an abuse of power and said, quote, "So New York is now regulating the contents of the data center and has banned a kind of computation, SHA-256 hash functions. They're directly controlling what constitutes a valid use of power." And this is an interesting angle to take it from too, right? Because what he's pointing out is that they are constituting essentially what kind of actions or whatever you can perform within like a data center, which could, of course, end up having ramifications across the entire IT industry, not just with crypto mining. And he does continue to say that will red states respond and ban computation taking place in their borders used for pornography, Netflix, and Disney? And this is kind of what I was like thinking as well before we even got down there. Like, at what point do you have just this weird power control like we continue to see within our society in the US, where it's like red state versus blue state, people take unrealistic, positions and try to hurt the other side from whatever point of view that they can, just from their perception, and abuse their own power. And that is extremely frustrating. Is a world where the state itself decrees what is an acceptable use of electricity or not one you really want to live in. U.S. Senate candidate Bruce Fenton also tweeted to object New York's decision and said no government has the right to tell people which software to run. Code is speech, and that is a really interesting one. But is code law? And let's get into Vitalik, I suppose. Maybe we get some information here. The New York State Senate passed the bill due to environmental concerns, arguing that the greenhouse gas emissions released by crypto mining will irreparably harm compliance with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in contravention of state law. However, opposers don't believe this ban serves its said environmental purpose. Buterin quoted Fenton's tweet to say he favors decreasing gas emissions for the environment's sake. However, the crypto mining ban doesn't really serve its purpose. Vitalik said, "Ultimately, I agree with this. That is, I oppose banning proof of work. The government picking and choosing which specific applications are an okay use of electricity or not is a bad idea. Better to just implement carbon pricing and use some of the revenues to compensate low-income users." Now, from his perspective, it's interesting because we do know, of course, that Ethereum's big push to proof of stake via the merge is an environmentally driven one. Obviously, that is a PR perspective that I think gets kind of overstated a lot, because you would have to go in and take into consideration, like we've talked about before, that a lot of the validators will be running on traditional data center hardware somewhere in the cloud, utilizing something like AWS, Google, and so on, all of which aren't necessarily the most environmentally friendly data centers around, because they typically also perform the same type of energy pricing hunting that crypto miners do. However, they aren't as incentivized to move to renewables because they don't have those incentives in place to the as much right now as crypto miners do. And that is because crypto miners are running 24/7. That being said, it's nice to see Vitalik come out from this perspective. I wasn't fully expecting it, right? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think it'll change anything necessarily. Carter also argued that environmental concerns are just a front, as the state has made some contradicting decisions. He tweeted, the New York Shaw 256 ban might seem a little more credible if they hadn't closed down Indian Point nuclear plant, 10% of state generation, and replaced it with new natural gas plants last year. Climate warriors they are not. Now, this goes back to perspective, right? That we have in general in the population, where like I've even had conversations with people regarding nuclear plants, and they are still scared of nuclear plants, right? Whereas like if you wanted to be as environmentally conscious as possible, you would be pro nuclear plants. But a lot of people seem to have huge misconceptions surrounding them, in particular surrounding the safety of them. We could go like crazy into extrapolating the amount of energy needed, the amount of nuclear plants needed, and then the amount of population needed to maintain those plants, and how our population is on the downsize, meaning that we would potentially not have enough people to maintain these plants, that sort of thing. But that could be an entire video within itself. But I highly recommend looking into it because it's quite fascinating. Bitcoin mining consumes nearly 110 terawatt hours of energy annually, which impacts the environment. Many prominent figures have protested the negative consequences. Buterin, for example, decided to switch Ethereum from energy-consuming proof of work to sustainable proof of stake. On the other hand, Elon Musk advocated for using sustainable energy sources like solar power for Bitcoin mining. The Bitcoin mining industry's sustainable energy usage increased approximately 59% last year and reached around 58.4% in the first quarter of 2022. As of January 2022, the U.S. constitutes 37.84% of the average monthly hash rate in Bitcoin mining, and New York produces 9.77% of that number every month. Moreover, New York's mining activity is mostly sustainable, according to Carter. So there you go. We do know that what was the number one incentive for miners to move to New York? That was cheap power. What was the cheap power being generated by? Hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is obviously something that would be renewable. And so once again, I go back to setting up incentives over creating laws, especially as it pertains to something like cryptocurrency mining. If you set the incentives properly, you do not need to tell people what to do. What is it? A good man will always try to act in the best manner, regardless of laws, and bad men will always find a way around the laws. And that is kind of a basic human nature thing that we've known for centuries, right? I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Morning Show every Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. Pacific and 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check out more clips here, or if you're interested in checking out the entire live show, you can check that out down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.